If you've been around here long, you've probably heard how much we love books. They are truly the key to lifelong learning. However, as our culture shifts and time goes on, it can be really hard to find the great books we most love. Enter our friend Kathleen Seeger and others like her who have private lending libraries full of amazing books they generously share with people like you and me. Today, we're talking about the power of living books and how we can keep them alive for the next generation. You're listening to the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. This is a podcast to help you homeschool simply, inexpensively, and enjoyably. Carol Joy Seid has been helping families homeschool for several decades now through her seminars and consulting services. In today's episode, Carol talks with Kathleen Seeger about her own vast library of living books and how you can gain access to her library and others like it. Listen in.
Welcome, friends. I am sitting across from a longtime friend of the ministry and friend of mine, Kathleen Seeger. She is speaking to us from up in Wisconsin, and I'm here in Oklahoma, but the wonders of technology never cease to amaze us, and we get to hang out together. So welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you, Carol.
So we go way, way back. There's a lot of things I want to talk about today, but first, let's just give a brief overview of your family. You're married to a pastor.
I am.
And you're pastoring in what town?
We live in a little town of Edgerton. It's outside of Madison in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how long have you guys been homeschooling?
Well, we have always, our oldest son is 24, and we have always homeschooled. I actually came to a seminar the first year I was homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
in Minneapolis, since that's one of your spots. And so William was 5. So we've been homeschooling ever since he was 5. And I knew no other families that homeschooled except for one. So I was very glad to come to your seminar because I always say, when I saw your seminar, it was everything I always wanted to do that I did not know existed because I had no mentors or people who I knew that had gone before me to give me wisdom. So I cried that day, that very first day. I was like, oh, this is everything I ever wanted. So really put me in a really solid place to begin the blessing of homeschooling as our family.
Yeah. And you have how many children?
We have 5. Right now, they're 24, 21, 19, and 15. And 2 of them are adopted from India. And so I have one son. He has autism. He still lives at home. Nina is in college at Concordia in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
She is studying in a church worker program and in a social work program. And I have one son in a diesel mechanic program.
Wow.
Mechanics. He loves and lives machines and engines and motors. One daughter went through a program and she works in a hospital. And then Lillian she's in 10th grade.
Okay.
And you met at Coldwater. So she did. The little blondie.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of your kids have been to Coldwater?
4. In 2023, we're signed up. And then, of course, camps were canceled. So we did a family trip with 2 guides. So my husband and I also technically did a Coldwater trip.
Wow.
It was very amazing. We went on Gunflint Lake and Little Gunflint Lake for, I think, 3 or 4 days. So we did a shortened trip, but it was fabulous. And then the next summer, 4 of them
went as students.
The youngest 4 all did their own trips at Coldwater.
Tell me about the impact. First, what is Coldwater for our listeners?
So Coldwater, I always call it a Christian leadership wilderness camp. That's how I describe it to people. And so, but as we know, nature is so important, so impactful to us, getting away into the wilderness and just really being able to connect with God and quiet. And some of my children did overnights, depending on their age, overnights where they actually slept alone in a tent.
Yeah. So what you're talking about, you mean doing this solo?
Doing a solo, that's what it's called. Yeah, doing a solo, and they just really loved it. It is hard, hard work, so I always families who ask me about it, I always say, "It is hard work. We were getting in the canoe the first day, and one of the children asked, our leader, "Well, how far are we gonna go today?" And he said, "Well, probably 8 or 9 miles." And my husband and I looked at each other like, 8 or 9 miles? Can we canoe 8 or 9 so, we're old people, but we did it. We slept, under bug nets. The kids chose that, bug nets and tarps. We slept on the ground under them. It was fabulous. And their children's trips are longer, but the guides are so great. They do such good devotions, great exercise. We had exercise when we got lost, although we weren't lost, but we were, we were lost, and there was lessons out of that. But actually, my husband and I, we had our own canoe. We were looking at each other. Are we really lost? Or is this an exercise? You know, we're trying to wink at the guides like we're lost, right? Like, but it was really fun. So I got a glimpse of what the children experience on their trips. And
Yes.
obviously their trips are harder, longer, but also deeper because of that. And they just get so much out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know kids, maybe kids aren't like I want to necessarily go every year because it is hard. But, those life-changing things are so important, and even just going once,
I know.
that bears so much fruit.
I know.
Yeah.
I agree. Tell me how the Homeschool Made Simple method has impacted your family and why you chose it. Why was it a good fit for you as a family?
When I started homeschooling, as I said, I didn't have a lot of mentors. I knew I wanted to have a Christian homeschool, and since I was a little girl, I always loved books.
Yes.
Always, always loved books. And so, my mother gave me my baby book a few years ago, and written in when I was only 18 months old, it says, "Loves books, but all books must be hers." It says, shares well, but all books must be hers, I think it was.
That's
And
great.
so, I always wanted them to be mine. But as a child, I taught myself to read when I was 3. Always loved to read, voracious reader, but yet I did not have anyone who was really feeding me great books or good books,
Yeah.
even in my schooling years, because I was super quiet. I was a fly under the radar kid. I actually sat and drew. I never had any reading lessons in school. They would just put me in the coat room and to draw. So why didn't they hand me like Little House in the Prairie or something? I don't know, but that was just the school and the time period. And so when I grew up and was an avid reader as an adult, I had my first son older as 30. We had infertility before his birth. And I knew that I wanted my children to have the chance to read all of those amazing books that I did not have a chance to read as a child.
Yes.
And then also that catches me up. Like I learned so much as a homeschooling mother. I like my mind is blown every day. Wow, I never knew these. And I was an A student. But still so much more. There's always more to know and to learn. And so I wanted my children to have that blessing of snuggling on the sofa, reading great books, to explore, having the freedom to enjoy time with our family, be in nature, and all of that just very much obviously is things you advocate and really encourage parents in the seminars. So I always say going to your seminars, it's like homeschool mom spa day, right? Because it's like everything, you hear so much good messages all day where our soul is fed.
Yeah.
We're reminded of all the good things, which are easy to forget when you're in the trenches
True.
and the day to day. So it's, a refresher, it's a reminder, and it's encouragement. So
Glad. Wow, you're making my day. Well, so out of your experience as a homeschool mom, the Lord's given you an extension of this philosophy in ministry. Tell our listeners about that.
So yes, when my son was born, even before I was a homeschooling mom,
Yes.
when he was 2 months old, he loved to be read to. We would lay on the bed and I'd hold like Goodnight Moon up in the air and his little head's next to me on the pillow and I'm reading him books and he loved to be read to. So even as an infant, he had a large library. And part of that surely was fed by my knowledge of what happens if you don't have that? Like, what do you miss if you don't have exposure to these lovely books?
Yeah.
And so by the time that I started homeschooling, obviously had your lists. I was primed to just have that library keep growing, growing, growing. And soon on, I learned of some ladies in the Charlotte Mason community that were operating these type of libraries, like Michelle Miller.
What type of libraries?
A living book library, a private lending library
Okay.
full of all the beautiful truth, beauty, goodness abounding in all of these books.
Mm.
And there are so many books that are out of print,
Yeah.
as you know,
Yeah.
that are lovely and are amazing books, but for a variety of reasons did not stay in print. And it's not that they weren't good books. There just is a lot of business decisions, copyright issues, that come into play, like the Landmark series, which is amazing series of books. So I, of course, have all 185 landmarks in this library and desire. My life was somewhat crazy, right? Like dragging kids to book sales and thrift stores and buying books online and buying books at your seminars. That takes an enormous amount of time, energy, money, sacrifice. And so I really feel like this library, which houses around, I don't have the exact number, 10,000 or so books, um, it's like a gift, right, to homeschool
It
moms
is.
that you don't have to sacrifice that time and that money.
Oh.
And we're each individually gifted by God with our passions and our things we can do, right? So not every mom needs to build every family should have a library, as you know well.
Yeah.
But not every family can have a crazy library like this. And so if your children want to study reptiles or Winston Churchill, even in your home library, you may not have great books about those topics. So this is the place to come where there is a whole shelf of books about landmarks. And there is, 10 books about Winston Churchill.
Yes.
And you can pick one for each of your children's levels and know that you're not just reading the book in the public library that was written by a textbook author or a snippet of facts, but you're reading a book where the author really was passionate and really loved their subject and loved children.
And the difference between literature and a textbook is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Yes. And even beyond like some children's books, like what I love, I have some Landmark books here in front of me because I love them so dearly.
Yes.
The Landmark books all have authors. What was so unique about this series is they all have authors that not just are good at writing, but also are experts on their subject, and not just experts to write a kid's book about it, but lifelong experts.
Do you love books as much as we do at Homeschool Made Simple? If you find yourself wanting to learn more about great authors and books, I've got the Kitty Lit class of your dreams. In our Book Lovers Bundle, Carol Joy Seid helps you fall in love with literature all over again. You'll learn about the authors who have stood the test of time, beginning with what Carol affectionately calls the 4 pillars of literature, then moving forward to the modern era. This bundle comes with 2 self-paced classes plus an interview-style conversation with Carol and JJ on the topic of literature. After listening to the Book Lovers Bundle, you'll be an expert on children's lit and never wonder where to find the great books again. Use coupon code PODCAST at checkout to receive 15% off your order. Visit our online store, homeschoolmadesimple.net/store to get the Book Lovers Bundle today. Did you know we have a free book list to help you start building your home library? Carol listed out over 150 books that are on her bookshelves that have stood the test of time. Whether you are just starting to build your family's home library or you want to fill in gaps, this list is for you. Why spend time, money, and bookshelf space on mediocre books when there are so many wonderful ones in the world? Visit homeschoolmadesimple.net/booklist to download the book list today. Happy reading.
And so the landmark on Adolf Hitler,
Yeah.
The Rise and Fall of Adolf Hitler, William Scheer wrote this book. And in the dust jacket, it says, for many years, William Scheer's job as an American correspondent in Berlin gave him the opportunity to meet Hitler, listen to his numerous speeches, and observe him at first hand at the moment of his greatest triumphs. What is set down in this book is based almost entirely on what the author himself saw in Germany and on the massive files of secret Nazi documents captured by the Allies at the end of World War II.
That's amazing.
And how
That is-
amazing to have your kids read a book written about Hitler by a man who saw Hitler, right? Like that can't even be
No.
written today.
No.
And so this book, I read it aloud maybe 2 or 3 years ago to my oldest. 3, are you trying to look at it, Carol? Carol can see it, even though listeners can't. But I read it aloud to my children. We had so much great conversation reading the book because Mr. Scheer's passion as a journalist about Adolf Hitler and what he saw, it comes out clearly in the book, the good and the bad, and so many funny things. And so it was fascinating. And I had a member of my library, a mom, check out this book and read it aloud to her husband and text me at like 11 o'clock at night and be like, have you read this book? You have to. And I was like, I haven't. She's like, you have to read this book. This book is amazing. And so that prompted me for years. I was like, okay, I got to get to this book because this mom says it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it is. And so now I've read it a few times over.
So tell me how people can become a member of your library. Tell me, and there are other libraries like yours around the country. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there are, the godmother of all libraries is, Michelle Miller. She started one. She's kind of a homeschool long-term veteran.
Yeah.
Her boys went to Hillsdale, which I know you're familiar with Hillsdale. She believe she had 3 sons. Well, she had God worked in her life that she kind of started a library similar to this maybe 30 years ago, something like that in Michigan. And since that time, of course, other ladies have kind of thought, that's a great idea. And they've broken off all over the country. And so now I don't know how many exist. At one time, there was maybe around 20, I think when I started mine, which is the Living Education Library, which is what I'm sitting in right now. And so it's actually a closet. There's bookshelves in front of me too, in a closet. But so all of these women are women who most of them were homeschool mothers. They have read these books, lived these books for many years, have a really vast, untapped knowledge of these amazing books, and have collected them and really have a passion and belief that you can't find these books in libraries anymore. I know I'm not trying to be sacrilegious, Carol, and saying, I know a library card and a math book,
No,
but
it's not.
public library is just not the same as it used to be. And so instead of the public library card, I really consider it a great blessing that families could come and consider our kind of libraries their library card. And while it does have a fee, the public libraries are paid for by taxes, I don't get tax money, for running this grassroots library. But I really feel it is $120 a year at my personal library, which I
unbelievably reasonable.
$10 a month. So that is pretty realistic to buy books. A lot of the books, of course, cost far more than $10 if you can hunt them down online. And your kids may only read them once. So you don't have to own them all. You don't have to own every book.
Do people need to be in your geographic area to be part of your library?
Yes. And so that's what's the true benefit of, hopefully, now that many women have kind of had this idea of there's ladies bursting out here, there, and everywhere. Actually, the World and Everything in It podcast just today had a interviewed a woman in Tennessee that she just opened her library.
Oh,
She had it before, and then they closed it of various reasons, and then they moved it. And so now, and they're homeschool veterans. I don't know her particular story, but she reopened it just recently. And so, there are lists online. I just had 2 emails in the past week of people who emailed me and said, "I found about your library on a Charlotte Mason library list," and things like that. And so there are Biblio Guides has a list of libraries, and I think there's over 70. I'm not sure how many are on the list right now, but I don't think it's made it to 100 yet, but somewhere in between 70 and 100 libraries. Some are small, some are large, some have 20,000 books, some have 10,000 books, some only have 2 or 3. But as people join, that's what equips us to be able to build the library, have more books,
Right.
serve more families.
right.
One of the hardships of my library is people come and see the books, and then they're like, "Well, I don't know, $120 is a lot of money." And some people are like, "You only charge $120?"
That's what I would say. I know what each of
Right.
those books cost.
Right, exactly. And so I really like to encourage families to think that this really builds our culture. It doesn't just benefit your own family. You are benefiting your own family and your own children enormously, but you also are benefiting every other family. When you invest in a library like this,
Right.
you are benefiting every family
Yes.
and all those children that join the library.
Right on.
Yeah, and so if you're investing into this, you are investing into building culture and helping a Christian worldview be present in the lives of all of our families.
Kathleen, one of my favorite books and movies is Fahrenheit 451. And I can't help but think of it as you're talking. We're at the end of the book where books are being burned and destroyed, and it's illegal to read books. There are a group of people that have physically become a book. They have memorized books. And when the protagonist in the movie goes up and meets them at this deserted area where there are a bunch of train cars and things, one will say, "Well, hello, I'm Pride and Prejudice. Hello, I'm To Kill a Mockingbird. Hello, I'm Crime and Punishment." And he realizes they have become those books. They have memorized them because that's the only books they can't burn is the books that you've memorized.
They memorized.
And so they have saved those books, the life of those books for the next generations. And that's what you're doing in this very important ministry. And I would be delighted to write a check for $120 if I even
Right.
come close to coming to that library and taking some of these books home with me. And then they get to take them home. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes. They
Wow.
bring their bins, they check out books. We have a system. And I
Wow.
really am trying to build the library that I wish existed back that first year that I started homeschooling.
Started homeschooling. Yes.
I have loved, even though I love owning these books, this is a beautiful place. I have people come, they're like, "I wish I could be here all day."
I know.
There's so much good, even the kids, they're like, "There's too many books here that I want to read." I'm like, "They'll be here next month." So,
Oh, that is
um,
so beautiful. Well, before we close, I'll tell you a fun little story. When we lived in Huntington Beach, down at the beach, there in Southern California, there was a little, and still is, a little tiny library, a little regional, neighborhood library there at the beach. And no one else was ever in that library but one hobo with a really, really long beard. And he would hang his backpack on the back of the chair, and then he would read the newspaper. He'd spread it on the table with a little wooden dowel through the middle of the newspaper each day, and he would turn the pages and he would read. And we had a fishing pole sticking out of his backpack. And that was the one other person in the library and myself. And so we love that library because, when libraries don't have a lot of money, they keep old books
right.
and they don't discard them. Those are the libraries to discover and to find, wherever you live. And so I would check out massive amounts. And we had a a bike trailer. I'd put JJ in the little seat, and then I'd fill the back completely to the rim of our bike trailer with books. And when I was a child, they limited how many books we could check out. And it was a trauma to my life. And so I would be checking out books in California, and I would just be holding my breath. I wouldn't make eye contact with the librarian because I was so embarrassed that we're checking out like 35 books, a week or whatever. And so one day my conscience just smote me, and I said to him, I am sorry we check out so many books. And he said, don't apologize. You help my statistics.
Right.
So we were keeping that library afloat, thankfully. But the old books tend to be in these kind of remote little libraries. And what you are doing is gathering books that we cannot find in major metropolitan libraries because they're
Right.
too well funded. And so they have to replace, Marguerite D'Angeli books with Cyndi Lauper's autobiography, which every
Absolutely.
child, of course, you wouldn't want them to miss.
What's current and popular is what their focus is. What's current and popular. And I have a tiny small town library, and when my kids were little, going there, I couldn't even interlibrary loan a lot of the books I wanted to read first to see if I wanted to buy them. I couldn't even interlibrary loan them from anywhere in my state. And that was what really led me to be like, I need to collect these beautiful treasures that are being lost.
I can't wait. This is a legacy. This is a ministry. And long may your flag wave, is all I can say. So tell people how to find their libraries in their areas.
If families, I know families have Googled, it's mostly we call them private lending libraries or living book libraries. There is a list of them on biblioguides.com
Okay.
under private lending libraries. I also know Simply Charlotte Mason hosts a list of living book libraries on their website.
All right.
So those are two places that I know you can find a list and see by state if there are any living book libraries near where you live. Then right now there's only one. There's mine, which was the first one, and then a friend of mine, Sarah Mazarek, actually of Plumfield Moms, she started hers last year in Green Bay. So we have opposite sides of the state, Green Bay and Madison area.
I love it.
We just have two,
I
but
love
hopefully there will be more in the future.
Yes. Well, Kathleen, you are a gift to all of us. And I know that sometimes it seems thankless, all the work that you've put into this, but the Lord sees it and he knows. And so I just want to say thank you and God bless you.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
You've been listening to the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. If you like what you heard in this episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or share this episode with a friend. It means so much when you help us spread the message of Homeschool Made Simple with others. Thanks for joining us this week on the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. Remember, Jesus' commandments are not burdensome. What he calls you to do, he will enable you to do. Blessings.